The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert Heinlein. This is 30 chapters with 382 pages. So the chapters were just right, in my opinion, and this is about a political revolution on the moon. The moon became a penal colony in which there were forced volunteers sent from Earth to the moon. As the Earth filled up, in the book, there's 11 billion people. They sent their convicts, and yeah, it's a penal colony. I think my expectations about this book were a little off. I was expecting it to be like, a survival or exploring the moon, that kind of thing. And really, it was all about politics. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just didn't know going in. So I was really surprised when there was so much about politics. There were some really cool and interesting ideas. A catapult, they grow grain and wheat on the moon, and they catapult it back to Earth, and it lands in the ocean, and they pick it up. And, I thought that was really cool. Another issue mentioned very briefly is longevity. If there isn't the gravity pulling down on your body, there's the potential that, there's not the strain on your heart and all the organs and pumping the blood. If there's not as much gravity strain, then maybe there's the chance to live longer. The moon Luna colony hadn't been established for more than 100 years, so we don't actually know how long people would technically live. It was implied, but I thought that was a really cool idea. The other one was radiation, right? You don't have a strong atmosphere protecting you from solar radiation, so it does mention that some people become infertile, or become affected by the solar radiation. So another thing that was born of this was the cultural and family ties. It seemed almost not Mormonistic, but like the family lines. It passed on property and allowed people to survive when a resource was scarce. And in this case, there was more men than there were women on the moon, and so one woman might marry two men. So, or in the case of a line family, it might be two women and three men, or two women and four men, that kind of thing. And, the family line, there could be old and young, and you just kind of carry on the traditions, but also the properties and stuff. So that was really cool. And the main character is Mannie. He's a one-armed computer technician. And so I was able to relate to him there. I do work with computers. So he interfaces with a guidance computer that launches a catapult and targets and all that stuff. And throughout his interactions, he learns that the computer becomes self-aware, has its own sense of self, and wants to become more human, so starts trying to learn jokes. So not the first thing that I would picture a AI doing, but that's okay. The politics, for me, it wasn't the most exciting part of it. I really wanted to learn more about Mike and what he could do. But yeah, it made a somewhat short book feel longer. I mean, almost 400 pages. It's a decent book, but there were times where I was just like, oh man, I just gotta keep going. So I did have to push through just maybe once or twice, but overall, good book. There are a few things that I didn't like. The Federated Nations, it seemed like a United Nations on steroids. I don't know. Even in the future, I don't see the nations of Earth agreeing on anything, including, a shared resource, the moon. I feel like Tragedy of Commons. I mean, there was bickering and infighting, so like it wasn't a perfect Federation of Nations, but like I definitely see that as kind of like a pie in the sky kind of thing. I didn't like the lunar language. I struggled. There was no ands or articles or a's. I think there was one or two thes in the whole book. So it made it tricky sometimes to understand what was going on. And I had to reread a couple sentences just to kind of make sure I knew what was going on. And it didn't take away from it. It just took a while for me to get used to it, probably longer than normal. I don't know, maybe I'm just a little too meticulous, but it just seemed like I was not picking it up right away. The last thing I didn't like was Mike was the single point of failure. everybody kept relying on Mike, the AI, and he kept doing all these cool things, and he got more and more responsibility, and that's how he came to be in the first place. But then also with the revolution, he was literally, I don't want to say doing it all, but he was doing the majority of the legwork and the communications and all that stuff. So he became the single point of failure. So I didn't really like that part, but there was a lot to like here. So I liked that Mike had different personalities to different people. The professor with Mannie, each, and I think Michelle was the other one with Wyo. So really cool. The binary tree cell structure, that was really cool. As someone who studied computer science, that that made a lot of sense to me, but for someone else, it is explained in simple terms, but just that connection wasn't there for, if you hadn't taken computer science or studied. No guns on the moon. I feel like that is a big, like, oversight. Like, I know that they talked about them being peaceful and they're nowhere to go, nowhere to run, right? You're on the moon, you can't just escape. I still feel like there would be guns on the moon. They said they had laser guns, but that there was maybe like a handful of them. It just seemed like something that wouldn't, at least with today's society. Maybe it's because I'm in America and guns are everywhere, but that aside, I feel like there would have been more guns on the moon. Not because of the gravity, like I know guns don't work in gravity, but I feel like there would have been some kind of dart gun or something. Yeah, either way, maybe I did like that. I mean, I don't know. With the zero gravity, anything's possible. But another thing I liked was rational anarchist. I had never heard of that before. So to me, when I hear anarchy, I think, like, don't need anything, everything's on fire. Maybe it's my too much playing Civilization where, the city's smoke is curling up from the city. But really, it was about individual responsibility as opposed to, somebody, the police are going to come and tell me that I need to be doing this thing. So it was a neat perspective that I had never thought of or seen before. So that was really cool. And that was Professor's philosophy. And I really liked how Professor was stayed ahead of the game. He kind of had options and steps and was constantly communicating with Mike and keep putting in options. And of course, the odds were fluctuating the whole time. The line family concept was really cool. Like, I liked that, you could inherit property and you didn't really have to be born into that family. You could opt in and opt out of the family. So I thought it was really cool that it was like a choice structure in addition to a bloodline. So very neat, very cool. It seems so strange when, we have a roughly 50-50% male female mix. It just seems so unusual, but it was really neat concept, kind of fun too. So the penal colony aspect, I liked that. They had their own language, their own culture, and they bonded with each other in that they called the earthlings earthworms. So yeah, the whole culture of it was really, really cool. And the last bit, the longevity, I think it's a cool idea. Is it true? Will it happen? I don't know. But I think if you could avoid the solar radiation and stay underground, I mean, absolutely. If you could handle, the vitamin D, the lack of sunlight, I think that it is a potential benefit of living on the moon. So this is all about living on the moon. There's lots of politics. But yeah, it was a neat book and I enjoyed it. There was only one or two parts where I felt like I had to push through, but overall, I did like this book. And buy your books used if you can.